Welcome to this video tutorial. Upon opening the main project file, this is what you should be seeing, and this will be the opener composition, and we will get to this in a second. Let's start off by first going into our segments folder over here. So if I drop this down, you can see that we have all of the segments individually over here. Alright, so these are all of the segments, and then we will have another folder which is other, and I don't recommend going inside this folder. This just contains all the assets, all the precoms and solids. And next we will have some files here that I've imported just for the demonstration for this tutorial. So these files will not be shown in the project when you open it. These are just imported for this tutorial only. So in order to import any file, you can double click inside this empty space over here, and then you can navigate to your logo or your file destination, and you can simply double click like so to import a file. Alright, so I have a bunch of files imported here, some logos, some pictures, and let's get started. And let's start off with the first one, which will be the background. So if I go inside this background folder, there will be a render folder, and inside the render folder you can find the background composition. Double click to access this composition, and inside this composition right away you can see that this is our background. Notice that this is using third resolution, so in order to preview this at full resolution, you can set this to full. I will be using half or third resolution on most of these previews, just so it works a little bit faster and I don't waste your time too much with this tutorial. So inside this composition you can see that there's a settings layer, and if I go to effect controls here at the top and press F3 on your keyboard if you don't have this window opened. Alright, so that's F3 on your keyboard. Let's start with the first one, so you can change the background color. So this will be background 1. Alright, you can change the tint of the background, and then we have background 2. Alright, which is sort of like this flare that's on in front of the ball. So change the color for that as well, and then you can change the color of the particles. Okay, and finally we have the ball effects, and you can change the color for that. So you can really see how you can really combine the colors, and you can use whatever colors you want and whatever color combination you want as well. Alright, so this is looped, so you can render this as it is, the full 9 seconds, and then you can just duplicate them and you can create a perfect loop. Alright, let's step back inside the project window over here, and let's go into our double bumper segment. So let's go inside this edit or the render folder, sorry. So double click to access this. Alright, and right away you can see that there is transparency. Let me just switch this to third resolution, and if I scroll a few frames further, you can see now that there's transparency. And one important thing to note here is when you want to render one of these segments that have transparency, when you go to composition, when you go to pre-render, inside Custom AV, where it says Custom AV here, make sure that whatever format you're using, alright, that there's the channels is set to RGB plus alpha. So not all formats can have this option. Usually I recommend going with QuickTime, and for format options you can set the codec to PNG and then hit OK here, and then you will have this option available. So RGB plus alpha, hit OK, select this and then hit OK, and then when you render this out, this will export it with the alpha transparency. So this will ensure that the final video that you edit will have the seamless transitions between different clips. And you can overlay this, of course, over any clip, since it has the transparency. Alright, so let's delete this and let's go back here. So that's just something to keep in mind regarding the alpha transparency. Most of these segments do have alpha transparency, so that's really important that you keep that in mind. Let's go forward a few frames here. Alright, until this is completed, and with this settings layer we can go to effect controls, and most of these segments will come with a transition options over here. So if I select this layer and press U on my keyboard, this will show me my keyframe information, and these two keyframes here control where the outro animation will play. So as you can see now currently, if I go to around, this is around the 5-second mark. Alright, so this is the 5-second mark. Now the outro will start playing at around this time. So it's really easy to adjust. Let's say that you want this double bumper segment to last up to 10 seconds. I will just increase the composition length here, and I will simply grab both of these keyframes. So it's very important that you grab both of these keyframes and you just move them over to around the 10-second mark. Alright, so now wherever this first keyframe starts, this is where the animation will start. And if I scroll further, you can see. Alright, so hopefully this makes sense. One important thing to note here with these keyframes is that you do not change the value for the second keyframe. So the first keyframe is 0, starting from the beginning, and the second keyframe is very important that you don't change this value. So just move these keyframes around rather where you want your composition to end. And you can see that as I move them around, how this affects the whole render. One thing here that you can do, however, is you can decrease the length or rather the distance between these keyframes. So if I shorten the distance, I can make my transition, my outro transition faster. Alright, so I will undo that by pressing Ctrl Z. I don't recommend that you spread these keyframes too much apart. So if you want to increase the duration of this transition, this might cause some choppy frames. So really, your other option here is if you want to make this animation faster, you can just decrease the distance. Alright, so that's the transition property, and a lot of other segments have this property. Alright, so let's just talk about a bit about the colors. We have background 1, you can change the color for that. So this is the background tint, then background 2 will be the flares in the back. So change the color for that. And then finally the screens. Alright, and you can see that this also affects the flare that's on front, and you can really combine make some nice color combination like this. And then finally we have another settings here, and other segments also have this setting. This is the glow intensity, and you can increase the glow of the logos, as you can see. Alright, so if I go back inside the project, in my edit folder right over here, we will have two compositions. So db_logo left. Let's take a look at this, and whatever you place inside this composition will affect the final render. So let's say that I will delete the previous logo that was here, and let's say that you import a new logo with your theme logo or whatever, and you can just drop it inside the composition like so. With this logo layer selected, I will press S for scale and just rescale this and try to move this into position. And also you can change this text. So let's say that this theme will be the wolves. So you can just type in the wolves, and you can use whatever font you want, of course. And like I said, whatever you place inside this composition will affect the final render. If I turn on alpha transparency, it's very important that your logo comes with alpha transparency, so it's transparent and doesn't have like a black background. So this is very important to keep in mind. Alright, so if I go back inside the double bumper render over here, or yeah, I can access this from over here as well. And let's take a look at let's preview a frame. You can see this updated, and the same thing will be for our logo right bumper. Alright, so you can even, for example, maybe you don't want to use the text. I can get rid of the text layer by pressing delete, and if I go back, you can see that this is updated and it's just the logo. Another thing to keep in mind here is that maybe your logos, the glow might affect the logos a bit differently, and depending on what kind of logo you're using, you might want to decrease or increase the brightness. So for example, if I go back inside my logo left composition and select this logo layer, I can apply a brightness and contrast, and let's actually just go to effects here. So this is with the logo layer selected. Let's go to color correction and add a brightness and contrast filter. And let's set this to full resolution, and I can just increase. You can see that as I increase the brightness here and then go back inside my double bumper, now the logo glow is even higher. So you might, depending on the logo, you might want might want to increase or darken the logo that you're using. So in this case, I might even darken the logo a bit, and if I go back, now the logo looks the glow looks pretty fine on this logo. So experiment with the darkening or brightening of your logos. Alright, let's go back inside the project and let's take a look at logo transition. This is pretty straightforward. Inside this render you will have this composition. Alright, and inside this logo transition holder composition, you can change your logo. Like so. So just drop your new logo, delete the previous logo that was there, press S for scale, rescale and readjust. And if I step back inside the render composition, here you can see it. So you can see that this also has alpha transparency, and like we talked about earlier, it's very important that you render this with RGB plus alpha channels enabled. Alright, let's clean this up a bit, and let's close some of these compositions, just so it's not as cluttered. And now we have come to the opener. Inside this opener you can find the render, and this is the opener renderer. And if I select the settings layer, here we only have options for the colors, so I can change the colors of the background. And let's select a different frame here, maybe set this to half resolution, and we can change the first color similar to the previous segments. And the flares in the back we can change as well. Then various scenes will have some particle effects with them, and you can change the color for those. So I can change the color here, for example. In a different scene, the particles will be, let's take a look at the next scene here. Alright, so maybe these particles here, you can change the color with this option, particle effects. You can see how this changes. We have the properties for the screens, so this will be, let's take a look here, and we can change the color of the screens. Alright, and the logo screens will be this scene over here, so you can change the background for this as well, as you can see. And these are pretty much all of the properties for the colors. And if I go back inside the project and step inside the edit, we have a bunch of logos here that we can replace. So these are all in order of appearance. So for example, opener 01 logo, this will be the very first logo that is shown, which is this one over here. So if I step inside this composition, I can change the logo. So I can drop a new logo, delete the previous one, select this one and just rescale this, go back inside opener, and here you can see it. Usually maybe some of these logos will also need to be changed for opacity. So if I press this layer and press T for opacity, I can make this a little bit more or less opaque. Alright, and this might help some logos fade a little bit better inside the render. Let's go forward here. Then of course we have all of these logos that you can change as well. So this will be logo opener 02, 03 and 04. So these are three logos here that are shown, and you can change these logos as well. So I can drop a new logo inside the composition, scale this down and go back inside, and here you can see it. And of course this will be the 02 and 03, 04 as well. And you can change this text here. So up here at the top, this will be 05 text, and you can change this text. So if I change this text here and go back, you can see it updating. Alright, so new video, you can see it here, and let's move forward. Alright, then for this next scene we have another three placeholders here. So this will be 06, 07 and 08. So you can change this as well. And you will just have to go ahead and delete this. And I can even use a text layer. It doesn't have to be your logo. I can even use a text here. So new text. And pretty much any image that you place here will transfer over to the render. And just to give you this example as well. So right, I changed 07. And if I go back inside the render, here you can see it, new text. Alright, and 08 will be the next logo next to it, and then 09 will be the media. And let's take a look at this media holder. Alright, so the media will go over here, and if I access this composition, and you can place inside this an image or a video and whatever you want. You can even place another logo. They're completely up to you. And let's just choose an image here, press S for scale and rescale this, just show you how it works and go back inside the opener. All right, and here you can see the image. And then finally we have our final logo, which is 10 logo, and this composition is a bit more special. There's a guide layer here, so this let's disable title action save. Alright, so this guide layer will show you exactly how your text and your logos are encapsulated, and I just made a very quick composition here with a few layers. But if for example, I can simply delete these layers here, and this will be your clean slate, and whatever you place inside this composition will affect the final render. So for example, I can place a new logo, right? I can move it over to the side, and I can type in new text here, and I can duplicate this text by pressing Ctrl D. Alright, so just to give you an example, I just combine multiple layers, and when I go back, you can see how this updates and works. Of course, this doesn't look as good, but you know, with some tweakings, and if you're using your logo, this should look fine. Alright, so that's the opener, and let's move forward. Player stats. Pretty much all of these, the rest of the segments are kind of the same as previous ones. So if I step inside the player stats render, let's see here, we have our settings with the controls and with this transition property here, which has two keyframes, of course, that you can move, and you can extend compositions. And you can change the colors for the screens and glow intensity and whatnot, just like the other segments as well. And if I go back inside the project window, inside this edit folder, there will be two compositions here, and one will be for text. And again, whatever you place inside this composition will transfer. So for example, I have a bunch of layers here for all of the stats, and I gave it the title and even a separator here, which is just a simple shape layer. So however you edit this composition will reflect in the final render. And then we have our media, where you can place a picture of your player. So for example, I can just drop a picture here, press S for scale, just rescale this guy. And if I go back inside not the opener, but rather the player stats, you can see this updated. Alright, so single bumper, pretty much the same as the other ones. Let's take a look here, and settings. Alright, we have an option for the transition, so this is exactly the same as the double bumper one. Text transition, let's take a look. Alright, and same familiar settings here. Pretty good. And titles will be the one that's shown in the preview. Alright, so you also have access to this composition. There's a setting for the colors, and it's very important that inside this edit folder, so there will be a composition here, and this is where you change the text. It's very important that your text sort of hits this edge here on this lower edge, for example. So if I move this forward, or rather upwards a bit, and go back inside the render, you can kind of see it gets the effect that it's floating. So maybe that's what you want, but I recommend that you set your text sort of touching this lower edge of the composition. Right, and if I go back, you can see that now it's sort of like on the ground. And then finally we have the video transition, which is pretty much the same as the other segments as well. Alright, and you can change this coming up text by going inside the text folder and changing this text layer here, and then you can import your media. This can be a video or a picture, and if I go back, you can see this updated, and that's pretty much it for all of these settings. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks for watching.